We did our first flip to the public. And how that worked is me and Vanessa, we saw a good property. We had the renovation experience. Vanessa had contacts with a lot of trades from working with different design shops in the city. And we bought a house under our personal name with the intention of flipping it. I like it clean. I keep a sub bank account for every single flip that we have on
project,
the go. Yeah. And that money just stays there. It does not move. We didn't have any mentorship or really know anybody that was buying apartments. And it was just this big beast.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we've got a special video for you guys today. We sit down with Fraser Nybo, but we're going to be diving deep into the corporate structure. So I know this is something you guys at home, for whatever reason, you're all obsessed with the idea of corporate structure. So Fraser is really going to peel back the curtain and show us exactly how he originally developed his corporate structure, how it's currently evolving, and what direction they're headed in now. But quick reminder, as always, you should always sit down with your own tax accountant and your own attorney to make sure you realize what's exactly right for your situation, because this is so contextual. So your situation really will dictate what is the right structure for you. So even if you think your situation is very similar to Fraser, please still go get expert advice. But I hope this provides maybe a spark of inspiration for you guys, and I know you're going to love it. So let's jump into it. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we've got Fraser Nybo back on the channel. Hey, Fraser, how's it going?
Good. How's it going, Matt?
Good. Well, in the last video we just shot with you, we started talking about corporate structure, and I know that that's an area that at least there is a niche of my audience that just loves seeing stuff like that. They love org charts. And so you mentioned you were willing to share it. So I thought, let's do a whole other video and just kind of chat about it. And yeah, so you've got a screen share ready for us?
Yeah, I actually do. So I'm gonna lift up my dress here for you guys, show you guys our internal workings of the corporate, just how the corporations work. So yeah, you just want me to dive into it here?
Yeah, and just kind of talk through the logic, or if like one business started before the other businesses, or if this was all a master plan from day one. Because again, I know that that's often a big question for people, is like, you know, why is it this way? And did you know from day one it was going to be this way, or did it evolve over time as you know, grew, experienced, realized different aspects of what you were interested in, or maybe tax implications, stuff like that?
Okay. And
so yeah, like I guess day one, the very first property you bought, I'm guessing the structure didn't look like this.
No, not at all. Not even close, actually. Yeah, so we bought our first property in 2010. We did that in our personal name. Started learning about real estate and how that just the typical process, I guess, people take. 2011, I met Vanessa. We met in Big White. And then she's a flight attendant, and she ended up starting to take layovers in Saskatoon. So she was immediately interested in like renovations and design and stuff like that. And then she ended up moving to Saskatoon in 2012. We bought another property in 2013, me and her. And then we were both on title on that one. I was on title on the first one. And then after that, and then we renovated that one too. Basically, the flip to ourselves for BRRRR, but we didn't pull out the equity.
Gotcha.
And then after that, 2015, she's from Montreal originally, so we bought a condo out in Montreal, and then it just progressed from there. So up until probably 2016, we had everything in our personal name. I knew obviously about corporate structure, and I questioned it. We got our accountant in 2012. I got my first accountant. I've been through lots of accountants over the years.
Yeah.
And then lawyers, worked with lots of different lawyers. So this is just kind of growing, right? This whole time, say even 6 years. And then eventually 2017, I believe it was, we really started diving into it and talking about what we need to do. And we want to get into apartment blocks. How do we do that? Do we incorporate right away? But we didn't even know how to get into apartment blocks. We didn't have any mentorship or really know anybody that was buying apartments. And it was just this big beast. I remember talking with guys at my 9-to-5 job. And I remember saying like you need $100,000, $200,000 to get into these apartment blocks. And nobody has that kind of money laying around. And you can just tell the mindset shift from then till now, if you fast forward. But yeah, so basically we kept everything in our personal name. 2017, we started, I think we did our first flip to the public, or actually, I think it might have been 2018. We did our first flip to the public. And how that worked is me and Vanessa, we saw a good property. We had the renovation experience. Vanessa had contacts with a lot of trades from working with different design shops in the city. And we bought a house under our personal name with the intention of flipping it. So I removed, how did it go? I put it under contract, removed conditions, but it was an estate sale, so it got held up in probate on my first one. So that was a lot of fun. And then I think it was 2 weeks after I put it under contract, I removed conditions, and then another one popped up in a good area that I like. It's called Riversdale in Saskatoon. It's going through a bunch of gentrification, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. We're maxed out for mortgages. I think I had 4 or 5 mortgages at the time, and like I just didn't know how I was going to do it. So I ended up partnering with the realtor who took me through that house. And like he had money, he could qualify. So we did a 50-50 JV, just classic. And we did that JV in our personal name. And then after that, basically my theory before we incorporated and what I was told by the accountants is you need to prove that you can make the money and that there's the income before you actually put the income out to do the corporations and do all the filings. And like there's a lot of expenses with corporations as you know, and probably a lot of your fans know. So that was basically it. So I had these 2 flips. We pulled profit off. Actually, one of them didn't do so well. It was the non-JV one, and but we made good money on that other one. So we were like, hey, we're going to start doing this more actively. This is where we're going to focus, and we need to set up a corporation for it. So we looked forward, and then right after that, I should mention we got into apartment blocks. So it would have been 2019. I think I put my first apartment block under contract, or late 2018, maybe it was. Actually, I think it was late 2018. And so then we started approaching lawyers and the accountants and saying, okay, we need to set this stuff up. And they were basically saying, okay, let's do this. So this is the original. Actually, I should mention on that too. So Vanessa had this corporation. We set it up. We didn't use lawyers or anything for this. So this was a side corporation. It was set up in, I think it was 2016 actually.
Oh, okay.
And that was her interior design corporation.
Gotcha.
Right. So it was just for client renovations. That's it. And in hindsight, we shouldn't have set that up. We should have just kept that in a sole proprietorship.
And do you mind sharing with the audience? Again, obviously, it's always very specific to your individual situation. So everyone watching this, you always need to go talk to your own tax accountants and lawyers. But with hindsight, why do you believe that now, Fraser?
She didn't make the money that she needed to support the corporation. Like she did. She obviously made, like she was always positive on it. But for the headache of having a corporation and filing all the taxes, and eventually we closed this corporation out, Magdalena Designs Corp. And just all the costs associated with that. In hindsight, it wasn't worth it. We jumped the gun on this in 2016. We weren't ready. And honestly, I was probably the catalyst to that. I was probably so driven to have a corporation because it's the thing to do.
It sounds professional. It sounds important. And it's something that I see every new investor or even every new business owner often get really caught up in. And I think that like there's a big lesson there that getting that MVP, right? Of making sure like, am I in the right business? Is this going to be the business that we're going to be doing long-term? Because again, I've seen so many people set out on one path to only discover that like after 3 months or 3 years, like, oh, actually it's this whole other thing that I want to go do instead, or I need a completely different structure than what I originally thought.
Yeah. So advice on that to anybody looking to do this, I would say start small until you're established. And like you said, you have clarity on what you want to do as a business, because we weren't there and we set this up and like we probably paid a lot of extra money that was unnecessary, but it was a lesson learned. The way I look at it, I didn't go to university, so that's education. Right? But yeah, so this was 2016 and these I think were set up in January 2019. I'll just note that. And they were set up. Yeah, we put that apartment block under contract late 2018, I believe. And January, shortly after we put it under contract, that's when we ended up pulling the trigger on the corporations. Okay, so this is 2016 to 2019. Vanessa's doing client renovations, and we're still doing all the real estate stuff. All the or we weren't even doing flips then, but all the rentals are in our personal name, right? And then we talked about how just don't make a corporation because that seems like the thing to do. Get professional advice, like you said. That's a good disclaimer. So then we fast forward. We have an apartment block under contract. Say it's January 2019. I think I had some flips coming up. There was a lag between our flips. I think I caught a period where we had a bunch of houses sold, and I think I had a few coming up, though I don't even think I had them under contract yet. But anyways, we ended up incorporating. And
do you mind just, again, obviously each person's situation is going to be different, but is this you sitting down, just you and Vanessa, drawing out like a list of, okay, I think these are the businesses and roughly how much money they're going to make and who's going to be involved in what, and then going and talking to the accountants and lawyer and being like, hey, this is roughly what we're planning. What's your input? Or how did you guys go about
this? That's exactly it. It has to start with you. You need to be the one who specifies the direction. The lawyers and accountants, what I've learned is they don't know what you want unless you tell them. They can't have your mind. So you need to know what you're doing and what you want to do, and you need to have the idea. You need to know enough to be able to convey that to the professionals and convey it clearly. Like you need to really, really be clear with them and go over it. And obviously there's a lot of expense with that. So just I want everybody to be aware that it's not cheap to set this stuff up. But yeah, and then so back to 2019 here, we set this up, and we set it up in a two-tiered system. And then we have the option of setting it up or putting a third tier underneath each corporation. So this is basically for the flips, Homes by YXL, YXL Holdings, and we incorporated extra provincially. So that means that we can, we're incorporated across Canada. Our name is held across Canada, and there's a bunch of liability and stuff if we ever move into other provinces, which we will with the apartment blocks especially. And then for the apartment side of the business, we had YXL Real Estate Investments. So, and that was also extra provincially incorporated for looking forward, because we know that we're going to move into other markets across Canada. So this is the passive side from a CRA standpoint. So this is what the accountants basically came up with and suggested, is that we should set up two different corporations just to keep the taxes really nice and clean. There's a lot of movement in the flipping business. There's a lot of money. We'll burn through 150,000 and just on one property in 4 months.
Yeah,
it'll burn through 170, sometimes 200,000 now in 4 months, 5 months. And we've had up to 4 properties on the go at once. So with this, I can go into a little bit more detail too. Under this corporation for the flips, we work with investors. So you need to keep that money separate. You cannot have money interchanging between accounts. You need to keep your investor capital separate. I know a lot of other investors, and I know some people, they don't necessarily care, and they just kind of have the money going wherever, and they'll transfer it back and forth. But I like it clean. I keep a sub bank account for every single flip that we have on the go. Yeah, and that money just stays there. It does not move until the end of the project, and then it gets put up into the holding company.
And it can just really make it easy, both for I think it's a nice practice whether you're a small business or a big business, honestly. And the reason it's nice for both is if you've got a lot going on, it helps keep things clear. But also, if you don't necessarily have a ton going on and you're not looking at it every day, it's really easy to quickly find snapshots, right?
Yeah.
You can quickly look at just that bank account. And if you know that all the transactions associated with it are associated only really with that project, it can just make it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's what I did with my, when I had everything in my, in my personal name, I had my accounts with Scotia. I would just open up a whole bunch of checking accounts.
Yeah.
With, East Heights,
Same.
Drive, all the addresses, I would label them. And then you set all your utilities and stuff to come out from there, just because there were if there were non-conforming suites and you had the utilities in your name or taxes or whatever, it all just comes out like you said. So yeah, that's a pretty good breakdown for what Homes by YXL was.
Yep.
And then if you move over to the YXL real estate investments, we already have sub corporations off this.
Do you mind explaining the concept of sub corporations and why you might want a sub corporation for each building or big apartment project?
Okay, so off YXL Real Estate Investments, the company that owns the apartment blocks, we have sub corporations off the apartment blocks or off YXL Real Estate Investments. So the thought process behind that and the reasoning behind that is from a liability standpoint, also just to keep everything clean. We want every building owned in a separate corporation, especially buildings with investors. So eventually there'll be a whole set of arms coming off of YXL Real Estate Investments, and it'll be whatever address 2, address 3, address 4, address 5, address 6, and that it's easier for accountants it's easier for financing, it's easier just for everything to keep it all together. And then from a liability standpoint, if say there was whatever 3 or 4 arms off of here, like I'll actually just copy it. Say this is an apartment block and this is another apartment block. Say if somebody in this apartment block gets hurt, they can't technically go back on anybody, like any of these other buildings. They can go back on this company potentially, but they can't go back on
directly after the other.
And I don't even think they can get at the YXL Real Estate Investments, just because this is so then these are set up also, I should note, they're set up as bare trustees. So they shouldn't have bank accounts. They shouldn't have anything in their name. It's just a bare trustee to hold title. So your lawyers, I think they charge anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 to set those up. A lot of lawyers will have those they're called shelf corporations, and what that means is they just keep them like on the shelf, and that they already own the corporations at the law office. And then when you ask for one, they just pull one off the shelf and transfer name over to you, so they don't have to go through the registry and all that. So that's basically what these are. And yeah, it's just a good, like you said, it's just good practice. And
essentially it's a very similar principle to with the flip projects and having separate bank accounts, right? It's just when we get into these apartment buildings that oftentimes you want a separate corporate structure or a separate entity essentially around it. And then obviously for anyone watching this at home as well, understand each province will have its own nuances as well. So some of the language Fraser's using might not be applicable in Ontario or BC or Quebec and vice versa. But again, what's really important about this entire thing, I think for everyone watching at home, is simply understanding that, hey, first things first, I need to understand what I'm doing before I can expect the lawyer or accountant to know how to structure it. And hey, feel free to jump in here if you disagree on anything, Fraser, but I think some of the big pieces that you need to know when you go to talk to the lawyer or the accountant is, roughly what are we in the business of doing, right? And is there multiple businesses here or is there one? And then beyond that, what are my intentions? Like, how much money do I actually think I'm going to make? And, because again, if we're talking tens of thousands of dollars a year versus millions of dollars a year, there is likely a different corporate structure that's going to be implemented and different consequences there. And then beyond that, what are the risks, right? So for example, your A-class neighborhood single family house rental property might be a different risk than that D-class property that's, had deferred maintenance for 50 years and hasn't been fixed up yet. And you're trying to turn it over, but it's going to be a while. Again, I think these are some of the big aspects that we as investors need to know when we're coming to our accountant or our lawyer to sit down and start mapping things out. Once we can kind of identify some of these big dominoes, it makes it so much easier for them to understand what to suggest to us, because essentially it's like going to an artist and being like, I'd like you to paint me a picture. And it's like, a picture of what? It would be helpful if I had some guidance here.
Yeah, exactly. No, that summed it up perfectly. It's really important. It's your structure is very, very important. It's gonna basically set the guidelines for how your business operates for the future. So you need to be aware of that. And then to break it down, I can break down this apartment block, say this 16 unit, and I can break it down even further to how we set it up. So then how it ended up working was, this is the apartment block, and it's actually flipped. I should have set it up differently, but I'll just leave it. So here's the actual apartment block. Here's the Bear Trustee Corporation on title. And then underneath of it is each investor. So the Bear Trustee is really important for protecting your investors also. So here I have a company out of BC, an investor out of BC that I work with. Another guy, he invested 100,000. He's got 21.25%. This is another investor. He's got 100,000. He gets an 18.75% ownership of that. And then here's YXL with 38.75% ownership. Then also, people are probably going to ask why the percentages are different. So this investor, actually, everybody was set to have 18.75 per 100,000. And this investor helped me guarantee the loan. So I've mentioned this before in your videos, but I'll mention it again because it's very important. So we had over 50% ownership of the property because we had a vendor take back, but then the vendor take back fell through for health reasons and I didn't have them under contract. So I ended up having to bring in another investor. So the other investor came in, I gave him 18.75%, but then I learned that once your equity position drops below 50% in CMHC's eyes, you need to bring in another guarantor or another person on, like, with ownership to bring you back above that 50% mark. So this investor, the new investor, actually ended up guaranteeing the loan with us. Like me and Vanessa, we had the net worth to do it, but just that rule.
Rules,
So he ended up coming in, so I gave him another 2.5%, I believe. And then this investor actually brought this investor in, so that's why she got another 2.5%. So, and I gave that option to everybody too. I said, if you guys whoever wants to help me guarantee the loan, I'll give you 2.5% more just to compensate you for the hassle. So that's why the percentages are different. Just changed the names, cleaned it up. This is all Vanessa. This is all Fraser in the public size.
Thanks again, Fraser, for taking the time to jump on the show, and really appreciate you kind of getting really nitty gritty into the details behind corporate structure, because I know it's an area that every new investor's got a million questions, and they always build this into a giant dragon they have to slay. But again, like we talked about throughout this video, the key is understanding what you're trying to do, understanding what the results you're trying to get are, and what potential risks you may be taking on in the process of getting those results. Once you can kind of sit down with your professional team, your accountant, your lawyer, with those factors, it becomes a lot easier to figure out what the right structure is, the way Fraser was able to do it for his business. And so again, appreciate you jumping on the channel and just sharing this, Fraser.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. I always love coming on the channel and chatting with you and all your guests. So it's awesome.
Awesome. And so if people want to follow along with you on your journey, what's the best way to do so?
You can follow me on Instagram, fraser.nybo, or you can just go to the website, www.nyboestates. And then you can go to the design side of the business. You can go to the apartment side of the business. You can find everything that we do there. So
perfect.
Thanks again to Fraser for taking the time to shoot this video. If you guys got value from this video, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to my channel. If you want to check out an entire playlist with Fraser, we'll link it up right there, so make sure you jump over and watch that playlist. And if you want to follow along with Fraser and his journey, link to all his contact information in the video description down below.